Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to The Naked Truth, hosted by me, Lori Corrigan, and sponsored by Snake Charmer Men's Body Waxing. This show is all about nakedness. Yep, spiritual, emotional, mental, where I pay tribute to the valuable contributions you gentlemen make both personally and professionally. It's a true safe zone for you guys to speak your minds amidst the current social climate where you struggle to be heard. Today, I have to say off script, I'm looking at three gentlemen who couldn't look any more different but couldn't be drawn together for any one particular cause. And that is what The Naked Truth is the foundation of, helping men find themselves. So looking at the Me Too movement, very unfortunately, it's become a permission slip for culturally and emotionally incarcerating men as a whole for the wrongdoing of a few. As a result, guys are struggling to navigate today's hostile social environment. So it's a good thing then that I'm sitting here across from Wesly Feuquay Gregg Garibay and Ron Interpreter of the Psylogia Institute of Consciousness Evolution, who will share their collective expertise on masculinity and the modern man. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you very much.
Very glad to be here.
Thank you. In a nutshell, Psylogia aims to connect each human with his or her inner genius and create a system of support for offering that unique gift to the community and world at large. You gentlemen have many programs to guide clients toward that intention. The one I'm most fascinated with, and the one that first brought you across my radar, is Men of Metal Gathering, METTLE, which just took place last week in Sedona. Wesley, tell us about that 4-day meeting and the mindfulness.
The 4-day meeting? I just got put on the spot. I think, Ron, I'm actually going to toss this to you, aren't I?
Oh!
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, the retreat that we're talking about had to be restructured, and so we're coming out of more of a planning type of scenario and situation. And so we didn't host the retreat. However, we do provide the same type of experience with our weekly men's group, and also looking at other ways of how we can foster and nurture that experience here locally within the Phoenix area. So part of restructuring that particular retreat was really looking at what's really going on. We've been coming across some new ideologies, new practices, and new ways that have been very effective with our men's group. And so we want to restructure that a little bit so there's a much more, much more enlightenment, more holistic approach to doing that. And some of those things are looking at dietary elements. We're looking at mental aspects in terms of how internal dialogues happen. But most importantly, what makes it a retreat is not only the location in Sedona, but also looking at the indigenous processes of how coming of age and rites of passages happen. And as you know, in a lot of our modern society, men don't have that type of healthy approach. There are rites of passage, but we've been really familiar with the coming of age at 21, going out with the guys kind of a thing, and, doing all the party stuff. So there are rites of passages that happen in the modern times. But what I'm talking about, rites of passage, is the healthy approach, how community comes together, how aunts and uncles and people of lineages of spiritual teachings come to honor that transition of men. So we want to integrate those pieces into that process too as well. So we're looking at things like water therapy. We're looking at vision quest processes. We're looking at sweat lodge therapy, and then integrating that with a lot of the Psylogia methodology in terms of different protocols, dyads that we do to help men process their information. So that's kind of what we're looking at with the retreat.
So it seems that our standing rites of passage, different things, very superficial, very harmful in a lot of ways. We go out and get shit-faced, and this is internet radio, so we can say that. You can drop the, perfectly placed word here and there.
Great.
Or the interview's going to get cold.
Wait.
A lot of stuff's going to start coming up on each one of us.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Make yourself memorable with your drop on. So as far as you are absolutely infusing the deepest of depth when it comes to changing or even just adding on to those rites of passage, but putting much more meaning to each individual's lives.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'll have my two brotherhoods, the two brothers here out to my left, express themselves in this. You mentioned earlier in the interview that there's three of us that really look different when you look at us right now. And I think that's really important to understand is that the difference that we experience in our personal life really has to tap into not only looking at the differences, but most importantly, where are the similarities and where are those connections happen, especially in this time of age when we talk about how men are trying to find a healthier approach. And so what I tap into is my Native American traditions and philosophy. I grew up on the Navajo Nation, and in that process have learned a lot of rites of passage ceremonies and learned a lot of healthy approaches in terms of understanding our relationship to the larger universe. But in a very practical sense, what does this mean when it comes to me putting food on the table? What does this mean when it comes to creating great relationships with our children? What does this mean when it comes to creating great social networking within the business sector or within the social sector of making friends? So these are all practical approaches that are philosophically based on Navajo tradition ceremonies. And one of the things that we hear quite a bit in a lot of Native American communities is that there's this spiritual calling. There's this larger sense of vitality and interest in terms of having men come center, having men claim this purpose in life that is really important for them to stand in that space, to own that space in a very healthy way. So a good example is the Me Too movement. A Me Too movement is a philosophical approach of saying that there is this cry for humanity to come center, which is the feminine energy coming forward. And so a lot of Native traditions have that prophecy, that there's a time and age where the humanity in terms of everyone, every society, every individual, every ethnic group, every community that is out there is going to be crying the spiritual cry to come center. And they're asking men to step up for that. And so that's sort of my role in this, is bringing in that element of that traditional philosophy, that Native American philosophy. And I think what we have here among the three of us is radiant. It's really beautiful because we have a sense of brotherhood among the three of us. Mm-hmm. And that's what emulates into the work that we do. So I'm going to hand this over to my brothers here and have them explain that a little bit more in their experiences.
Okay. If one of you would take the answer why we have to be so harsh in this shift you're talking about for men to step forward. Why is it so painful and hurtful to men with this Me Too movement leading the charge? Is that how it is historically? There has to be such an undercurrent of pain.
Yeah, I think, kind of the place that we come from, like there's always going to be a sense of suffering. Like you either can suffer through staying where you're at, or you can suffer through growth. And, we're coming from the place where we'd much rather suffer through growth and see growth and development and potential reached here. And I think kind of what we're going through now is the severe growing pains of this next transition, this next, phase over in human evolution. We've had too much of the what I call the immature boyhood psychology of men dominating that sense of patriarchy, dominating how things are ruled and governed in the world. And we really want to step it into a place of maturity, a place of healthiness, which takes on the responsibility of being part of the cure, being part of the remedy to the situation rather than continuing to contribute to what, to the suffering. So, with the rise of the feminine that we're seeing now, it's great. We honor it. It should have happened. It needed to happen, and it is. But as that's coming about, we as men shouldn't feel less empowered. We should be more empowered by it. It's the call. That's from amongst all the Me Too stuff. What I'm hearing is a call to men to step up to really establish that sense of security and safety amongst other threats that exist out there. And it's part of our responsibility, part of our duty to provide that.
Wesly?
Yeah, actually, I'm going to take it backwards a little bit because this was articulated so beautifully that I can go back to your original question. I actually have an answer for you now. And it's not so much what happened at a retreat that didn't get off the ground, but I can tell you what we're doing every week. And we are a group of men that are dedicated to the 4 principles of existence. And there's a complicated way of putting that, and there's a simple way. And the simple way is saying that no matter what, we're not going to escape faith, family, finance, or fitness as domains of life that we need to navigate. And so each week, whether we're meeting at a retreat or we're meeting with our regular meetings. We're dedicating ourselves to growing in those 4 domains and cross-training in those 4 domains and not focusing on any one exclusively. So fitness is how we take care of ourselves, our body. It's the energy on tap that we have to show up for legacy or mission or fullness or love. Faith is our commitment to truth, our commitment to purpose within, and how we hone that and how we cultivate that within ourselves, that we're constantly growing.
You're saying that could or could not include religion and spirituality?
Has nothing to do with the R word.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with the R word whatsoever.
Okay.
It is what we are willing to devote ourselves to, and that is self-identified. Yeah. So I never talk about the R word. I don't even know what you were talking about.
Me either.
Amen.
Right. I was a college professor for a long time, and my students would always ask me the same question. I said, I don't know what you're talking about. Never heard of it.
No.
So no, it doesn't have anything to do with that.
Good.
So what I like to say is all the brands of toothpaste, brush teeth. Choose the one you want. Doesn't matter. They all clean teeth.
Brilliant. That's the takeaway, I think, so far.
Because have you gone down the toothpaste aisle? It's really overwhelming.
Yes.
Right? And they all clean teeth.
With and without fluoride. What are we supposed to do about that question?
They all clean teeth. It's totally cool. So the other domain is family. Of course, that could mean our immediate family, but we mean the people that support our mission, the people that support our purpose, the people who are interested in how we're growing and developing as people, and the people that support us in that. So that could be our primary family, but a lot of times it isn't, right? So,
and thankfully, we are strong enough to separate ourselves from the blood relative who is actually yanking us down as far as can be.
Yeah,
there you
absolutely.
go. Right?
We're allowed to do that. And can you just qualify that with people who are, but their blood, they have to be their family.
It doesn't
Tell
matter.
them why not.
Toxic relationship is a toxic relationship.
Right.
You gotta let it go.
Yeah, exactly.
Can you touch on that a little bit and how they can do that without feeling, well, they're going to get pressure from family. So there's a lot of different reasons why they can't.
I can address it existentially, and there's a lot that would need to be maybe said before I can say this, but I'm going to throw it out there.
Throw it out there.
The way we understand purpose and the way we understand mission, the way we understand gift and genius is that the caregivers are actually already scripted to create the wound.
Mm-hmm.
It's the job of the parents to create the wound. If they don't, we'll never leave the nest.
Mm-hmm.
So if your life is not perfectly fucked up by your parents in a perfectly fucked up way, then you will never actually get to be yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Okay?
you end up getting anywhere.
So the parents are actually cosmically chosen to give the wound, to give the marking. We use an old story about an axe wound.
Mhm.
And you know exactly where you got hit. You know when you got hit. You know where the blow was. You remember what it felt like. That's true for everyone. It's the mentors that heal the wound.
Mm-hmm.
So parents can be the mentors as
No,
well as
They're
the-
probably never going to be.
Oh, okay.
No, you're probably never going to hear from your mom or dad what you really want to hear.
Yeah.
Hmm.
If you do, you're very, very fortunate. But I don't think it's the expectation that should even occur. Yeah. So what I really want to say about that is the caregivers give the wound. It's the mentors and the friends and the people that support you. That way I defined family.
It's that
Mhm.
chosen family. That
Yeah.
Chosen.
They are the
There's the
ones
word.
that heal the wound. So what we say is the wound and the gift are the same thing. You just turn it over.
Yeah.
Okay. So then it's not a wound, it's a marking. It's like tiger markings.
Yeah.
Like zebra markings, like leopard
The tree
markings.
rings.
And so your
Yeah.
markings tell other people that you're you and that they can get to you when they're looking for healing, when they're looking for mentorship, when they're looking for guidance, you see?
Hmm.
So what do you do with the family? You bless them. And there will come a day if you do enough inner work where you will thank them.
Yeah.
Because had they not messed you up in exactly the right way, then you wouldn't be you. So the imagery that we use is that the wound is already there for the arrow to go into.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. This is powerful.
Yeah,
This is-
so there's a lot of mythology there, and there's
But
some
it
other
makes
deep
perfect
stuff.
sense.
But I think you can glean. You can really catch what I'm throwing, right?
I absolutely can.
Yeah. So hold on, before you do that,
Yeah.
so there's that one other domain,
Okay.
which is finance. So remember, there's fitness, faith, family, and there's finance, because we don't get out of the trappings of exchanging energy.
Mm-hmm.
We have to be able to cultivate the ability to exchange energy. We measure it in money, right? Money may or may not be real. That's another really fun conversation.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, what's your great definition for finance? You always remember this, Greg.
It's about energy flow.
Yes.
Yeah, where you're investing your time, whether it's your time, your energy, what have you, even if it is stacks of cash, like it's about where it is that you're flowing and where you're seeing a return back.
Yeah. And we call it finance because ultimately whatever we're engaging in is an investment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So faith is the same way. It's not religion, and finance is not money.
Not money,
per
exactly.
se.
Yeah.
Yes. And
It's
family isn't your
investment.
blood relatives, and fitness isn't working out.
Yes.
But it is
yes.
consumption.
Yes.
So
Wow.
we see those as irreducible domains of life that we need to be able to cultivate so that we can show up as our best exemplars of healthy masculinity in a time where it's not popular to be a man.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way we've seen rapid growth is by cultivating and cross-training across those domains
Mhm.
at once, because they co-arise.
And even if you're strong in one area and weak in another, it doesn't mean that okay, all of a sudden you just let that one, slack off and then put all your energy into the other, the strength of the other one. You need to still maintain that strength and while you're building up that weekend. And, that's why we're cross-training all four domains, because we do see that when you're working all four together in dedication, even to strengthening that one weakness, there's an exponential amount of
Exponential growth.
Isn't it like a recipe? If you put 2 cups of sugar that calls for 1, you're going to completely blow it out of the water. So you can't put more in, so this one can not thrive.
Yeah.
Is basically it.
Yeah. There's got to be that equal balance of everything.
So then, Wesly, you started it with the healthy expressions of masculinity. Ron, would you like to take that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I like how Wesly has described this in very simple detail and how it's organized. So coming from a Native American background, I would truly say yes to all of what he said. One of the things that I personally have had insights with, and also conversations that I have with my elders, my traditional Native American elders, is that Wesly talked about this idea of having a wound, that we're brought into this world with this sense of wound, and our parents are the ones who initiate that or have that representation of that. In the true essence of how family works in a lot of Native traditions is that we look to our aunts and our uncles, which are the mentor elements that Wesly is talking about, to give us that insight, to give us that upbringing. They're the ones who are responsible for teaching the child, teaching and giving them the songs and giving them the rites of passage and holding that space, taking them out to do basic things around the cornfield, around what it means to be a man, how to go out and hunt. Those are very traditional values, but it's not given to the parents, the biological parents, to do that duty. The biological parents are there to nurture, provide the basic elements, but it's up to the aunts and uncles and grandparents to serve that role in teaching the child. So it's really appropriate for what we talk about in terms of men today. We don't have a modern sanctuary that allows us men to go out and build those relationships. We get into a very systematic approach. Not that it's a wrong thing, but it's just how life is. We create this. And so one of the things that I love about Psylogia and what we do with the men is that first they got to take ownership of that. This is my world. This is exactly how I'm living. I don't have those connections. I don't have those access to resource. This is truly where I am. So they take ownership of their own demise, of their own challenges, that they're actually their own perpetrators for these things that they're creating, which is really important, is to recognize that piece. Then the second thing is we reinforce it with these practical approaches that make sense. So we're not there meditating and doing this kumbaya kind of stuff, right? We're really there talking about the essence of really what it really means to be in this space, and how do I transcend this ideology, this enlightenment, into very specific practical things that I can do. And we've had men come from all walks of life who are part of this men's group. One of them is suicide recovery. I mean, he was in a place where he was truly in this place of really saying, I don't want to be here. Going from that place to really being one of our ideal candidates for the work that he's done. Just immense. A great mentor, a great ambassador for what we do, and a very great brother for all the younger ones who are coming in. And I think so. That's what comes to my mind about this idea of healthy masculine from humanity from that standpoint, from a traditional place.
Interestingly, you're not going to initially see the connection here, but my business is men's body waxing.
Mm-hmm.
It is not about hair removal. They come in for hair removal, and it happens. But what happens during that time? I can so understand what you're saying about the level or the lack thereof of masculine connection in a healthy way in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
The one question I'll always ask somewhere during the service is, so how many of your buddies have you told that you're here doing this? Ew, silence. Silence and a grin, a shameful, sheepish. It's usually, oh,
That's
my
like asking
wife or
somebody,
my
what
sister.
mental illness do you have?
Really?
Hi, I'm
Tell me all about
schizophrenic.
you. Yeah.
I have multiple personality disorder.
Tell me about all your childhood traumas.
Maybe on a lighter scale, because I'll turn it around on them and say, hey, you're just product of your environment,
Yeah.
because the social stigma of going in and having anything done personal care-wise for men is huge. Starts off initially with, ew, are you metrosexual? Whatever that means. I don't know. That's an M word for me, like an R word for you.
Mm-hmm.
And one step away from gay, which again, why is that being bashed and brought into the situation?
Precisely.
So guys are running scared with, can I be here? First of all, can I be here naked in front of a woman who is not my wife, girlfriend, whatever? Is it okay that she's touching me in a place that society vilifies? What are my friends going to think, which is why they don't know I'm even here? And from that springboard, I purposely draw out, because psychology is my favorite flavor of human. I've been told so many times, I can't believe I just said what I said to you. I've not even said this to my mom or my wife. And I'll just look at them and lean down on the table while they're naked and give them a kiss on the forehead and thank them for honoring me with their trust. And they cry most often after that. And they're like, can I go to the bathroom, please? Can I go to the bathroom? It makes me feel heartbroken and uplifted at the same time.
Yeah.
Conversations have been incredible. They're in horrendous dead relationships, which is the segue to the next thing. You guys talk, or part of your programs, about bringing that together in a healthy way.
Yes.
One of you would like to take how you bring male and female energy together positively?
Well, I think there has to be a sense of respect and trust on both parts, first and foremost. If there's any kind of lack of respect or a sense of one being less than, it's not going to get anywhere. It's not going to have a healthy foundation. So it's not even coming from a place of even equality, I think. It's about honoring and respecting each other for your own unique gifts, for what you're both contributing and co-creating. And that's what will create the space for us to have the conversations and getting a better understanding of each other to then, build something strong and uplifting.
If it's past that point, which is so much of what I hear, that they are terrified, they now live in a communicationless relationship. Often the woman is pre and postmenopausal and she's not taking hormones. So that right there is a brick wall.
Right.
Libido is gone, which I think is the last thing that should disappear from a relationship because of the value of that energy. And he can't talk with her. He's not able to, it's a sexless marriage, and he can't leave because if he does, he's going to be shamed for leaving. What is that? That's one of the reasons for divorce is something about alienation of affection. That is a true reason for being divorced. And if that's on the divorce decree, he's going to lose the last shred of masculinity he has, because it's going to be misinterpreted,
right,
that he just wants to get a piece of tail. It's intimacy he's looking for.
Right.
That happens to also include sex, but is absolutely not strictly sex.
Well, that's where we even, we talk about that too. Like, affection doesn't necessarily have to mean a sexual encounter. Like, affection just means like there's a physical, there's the physical touch. Physical touch being one of the 5 love languages. So, if that's your love language, like, you have to be able to own up to that aspect of yourself and communicate to that to your partner, the importance of that and that it plays in the relationship. As far as the solution to that kind of dilemma. I think back to when we were doing like the No More Mr. Nice Guy stuff, like you really just have to come to that place of saying, reducing that shame, finding a way to reduce the shame and getting over that hump and saying, this is what I want. This is what matters most to me, and go for it.
And there's the rub. I hear it every 6 weeks they come in. How are things at home? Improved? Worse?
Yeah.
And it's always, except for one or two, with a little bit of coaching on my side on what to try. And I am not any kind of sex therapist. I just am a woman. And that gives me room for advice sometimes.
Yeah.
What would you say to men who are paralyzed and they know the rest of their lives are destined to be horrible, and that's what they're gearing down for, not up for, but they're gearing down to experience nothing in their lives? How do you encourage someone to walk away from a situation they think is completely impossible to do? Or
I
anyone
think
is
we
welcome
should
to
just
think
rip
that.
off the Band-Aid.
I'm having like
All right,
these
so
different.
Yeah.
Let's rip off that Band-Aid. Let's throw some stuff on
to rip
fire.
off the Band-Aid is
This is going to be good.
it is. It is.
juicy one.
It's going to be good. Stop trying to please.
Yes.
That's the answer. Stop trying to please. That individual needs to find their own authentic way that they need to be. Like Greg said, they need to own up to that. And they need to stop all the trying and attempting and clawing and everything that they take on to try to make it work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They need to be vulnerable enough, and I don't like using that word, but they need to be authentic enough to state, this is not working for me, and this is how I want this to go, and I'm inviting you along. You are welcome. And if you can't, or you won't, or you don't want to, or it's not for you, then we should respectfully continue that. So I think the healthy masculine energy that we would want to evoke is being able to openly say, this isn't working, it's uncomfortable. Claim what the elephant in the room is, and then say, look, and I want to work this out with you, or you're invited along the journey with me, or can we look at what this looks like together? That there's an option given.
So the 5th time the gentleman tries this, he gets to learn that, okay, it's not going to happen, and I've put forth everything I possibly can and still hit a brick wall, and I can walk away.
Then some things are trying to fly apart, and we should let them.
Yeah.
See,
it
the
kind of
verbiage
goes
is
back,
perfect.
it kind of goes back to what I said earlier. Like you can continue suffering with no change, or you can suffer through growth and change.
And that directness that I have is coming from something else that we could talk about. There's 3 states of relationship, and they go from polarity to infatuation to intimate communion. And a lot of people got into relationships a very long time ago because we all bought into the myth that we marry somebody because we love them, right? And it's one of the first questions we ask as children. Mommy, why do you love daddy? Well, I love him. So you go, oh, that's what you do. When you love somebody, you marry them, right? And yes, some little kids will even say, I'm going to marry mommy when I grow up. I'm going to marry daddy.
Oh, you're going to have so many issues.
But they do. If they get into an infatuous relationship, they find that parent. They find the replicant parent, right?
Very much so.
Yeah.
So people get into infatuous relationships, which is a way of saying, I'm a broken half person looking for another broken half person. If we come together and our jigsaw piece, somehow our mangled jigsaw pieces fit together, we'll feel like a whole person. But that isn't the way to work through that core wound. It's what a lot of people have chosen. So a lot of relationships that came together in union over infatuation, or we call it love, but we really mean that there's some sort of infatuous, I call it Roman love.
Temporary.
Instead of calling it romantic, because it just goes over everyone's head, I say it's Roman love. But those relationships don't have any shared evolutionary purpose. So they were brought together to fulfill a need that person was not able to do because they chose somebody that looked like the parent that they have unresolved issues with. Then that person ends up triggering you exactly the way your parent did, right? And then you're going, we can't reconcile this. Now, what happens? Polarity drains out, which is sexual chemistry. You called it
Libido.
libido.
Yeah.
Same thing,
Yeah,
right?
same thing.
And then, okay, you're not meeting my needs. And then they come at that from a first stage demand, which is you need to fulfill these needs for me, right? So we got problems on top of problems on top of problems. So in those relationships, if they don't have any overlapping purpose, if there's no evolutionary shared meaning where this person and this person come together and something unique is created by their union, then probably that relationship's going to have to fly apart. And some things are trying to fly apart. That's taking off the Band-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
Don't we think that children are going to be that thing that's going to draw it together?
It is for some people, and some people, I think that's the path. I do not think it's true for everyone.
For a
And
lot
I
of
also
the
think that it's
demise.
possible there are children involved and the children were not your shared evolutionary purpose.
Yeah.
So
that just adds more complex issues.
more
on top of
charge onto a situation. So most people don't have the guts to say, okay, the two of us together don't make the world a better place. That's a tough thing to...
That's a potential
That
outcome.
is so different than what we are culturally
No
trained.
kidding.
Yeah.
So, which
Yeah.
is why you guys exist and do what you
Yes,
do.
That's what we do.
Starting from childhood. Another show I had, we talked about starting kids when they're young to love themselves, to know exactly what that means, to talk positive instead of letting that monkey chatter start to develop. And then by the time they're in their high school years with all their hormones starting to rage, that it's just out of control. So it starts young, does it not?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And like in your culture in Navajo, you recognize that.
Oh, absolutely.
We do not,
Mhm.
for the most part, in standard cultural.
Yeah, I think if we take the cultural elements out of it, because culture is a dialogue, is a conditioning of a certain group or a community in terms of how they understand each other and how they coexist. So if we take those elements out of that and really look at what some of the things that Greg and Wesly are talking about in terms of the psychology or the awareness of the individual, then that gets really down to the basic things of how an individual operates. And I think that's really important. And when we look at Navajo traditions and philosophy, that's what they do. I think
Give me something to relate to
absolutely,
for my culture.
absolutely.
And I'm using that word because I don't know what to fill it with.
Absolutely.
Yet.
I can use it in all cultural streams. So we talk about marriage and relationships. That's what we're talking about right now. In a lot of Navajo traditions, there is an arranged marriage. In other words, it's up to the parents to determine that relationship in terms of a union. So from a cultural sense and from an energetic sense and also from a universal sense, it's two individuals, two parents who had lifelong lessons in terms of how the universe operates and how it coexists and how creations happen from not only from a functional standpoint, but from an energetic standpoint. And so the arranged marriages were set up so that there's a cohesiveness of how these individuals will then transcend this relationship with the universe. So it's really not about this is what kind of life I want. This is what I need to fulfill my personal life. This is my life choice. This is my soulmate. It's really nothing about that. And so in today's time, we have a lot of Navajos who are geared towards that thinking. They misunderstand these traditional ways as this is what's rightfully mine. This is what I am calling in. This is what my sole purpose is in this relationship. You're my soulmate. So they overlay that concept to it, and it's a very dysfunctional concept. And for me, that I finally understood what that meant. I went through a divorce, and for the longest time, I didn't understand why that separation took place until my ex-wife told me, Ron, this is what you did not fulfill for me. And I went back to my elders and they said, yeah, that makes sense. In our Navajo tradition, the cultural construct is that if everything belongs to the female, when a man comes to that family or when that man is gifted to that family, his responsibility, his purpose, his mission, his creed is to energetically make sure that the function of that lineage is continued through the woman. So the woman has the last say-so as to how that person is going to live there or not. So you can either come with, all the guy comes is with a saddle and a horse. That's all he comes with. That's it, a saddle and a horse. And if that woman doesn't like what's happening, doesn't matter if they have kids, she'll throw his saddle outside the hogan and say, you're gone. And I think that's a really clear message that we men have to have. is we got to understand that masculinity is a very much aligned element of the feminine energy, not female, but the feminine, that we have to coexist there very healthy. And I think with our men's group, the Men of Mental, and also the psychological and the framework that we use in terms of what masculinity really is, and also what feminine energy really is, and how we bring that within ourselves. So if men really understand and really can be honest with their feminine side of who they are, what does that really mean to me as an individual, as a man? If I understand and I cherish that as that feminine energy, then I'm going to displace that respect and honesty to other feminine elements out there, which in this case is a female in terms of a relationship. That individual, that man's going to cherish that and work very hard to make sure that that's much in line. So a relationship and continuing a relationship always doesn't mean for you to be in a marriage. We're not here to help men save a marriage. We're here to have them understand their true identity of who they are and how they can really stand in that position and stand in that ownership. And part of separation, part of divorce is a healing process. It's a coming of age process that can be looked at that way too as well.
So the word failure is all the time connected to divorce. That is our structure. That's what we've done to ourselves, is everything is either a success or a failure. There's no learning in there anywhere. You just are bad or you're good. Thank you for saying that part as far as you don't need a marriage to bring together and exchange the energies.
The marriage should be about you internally. What's the marriage between your masculine and feminine? Understand that piece, come and own that, develop a healthy identity around that. And then that marriage or that concept of marriage will be transcended out. I have a much more healthier relationship with my kids now than when I was actually in a marriage, an institution of marriage. My relationship with my kids are beautiful now. I have a really great ownership of me as being a father. What does that really mean? I'm not so lost in the responsibility of being a husband, that caused a lot of pain in my life, caused a lot of frustration in my life. That's removed. So I now know my mission and my responsibility as a man, as a father to my kids, really clear. And I have a much more healthier relationship as a result of that.
And it's reciprocal.
Absolutely.
So perfect. Okay, gentlemen, the word marriage. Are you getting the sugar down your spine here?
No, Greg, I think we should.
I know I am.
I think we should tell Lori about our breakup artist.
The breakup artist concept.
The breakup artist concept. We used to have this crazy idea that we would, we actually wouldn't help people save their relationships. We'd help them get out of them.
Yeah.
I talk about that too. I don't do that, but I suggest very strongly they consider that as an option because from what I can see, marriage is a governmental lockdown. You're bringing a third party into your relationship because, that's what we're supposed to do after we say we love you. And it tweaks us. Yeah. We're not admitting to it. Everything's hunky-dory. We have a $10,000 wedding. Yay. Yeah. All of the stuff around marriage is so contrived, it's ridiculous. Yes. If your relationship can't stand on its own, why lock it down? I have yet to hear a good explanation. This is really close to it right here today.
Yeah. I'll pull off one more Band-Aid, right?
Yes.
We have this ideal of marriage that's 200 years old.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. But the world of complexity has now marched on. But what's been happening since probably 1950, nobody wants to admit, which is episodic monogamy. Right? So we've got this idea that we're going to get into a marriage. Like when you got into a job and you thought, I'm going to have one career. The one career
life, one marriage.
That was last century. Mm-hmm. That shit isn't happening for anybody ever again. And pensions are gone. And I was in education. Sabbaticals don't exist anymore. Mm-hmm. Well, it carried over into marriage too, right? We all had this ideal, this romantic idea, this Roman love idea of like, one for me who's going to complete me, right? Shoot Jerry Maguire.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Between the eyes.
Hollywood right? And waxing, too.
Yeah. And so what's happened is we're all thinking, oh, my God, there's this expectation. I have to make this work, failure or success. Mm-hmm. But what's really happening that nobody wants to admit to is episodic monogamy. Mm-hmm. Someone's in my life for an episode or a season. We fulfill something for each other.
And when it's run
its course, we move on to a new relationship. But that's what's happening
tens of
anyway.
thousands of dollars to do it.
Yeah, I know, because we're crazy, right? So what happens is, but everybody thinks, oh, don't even get me started about the goddamn guilt. Everybody's getting married because they want to shag, right? Because they got all the guilt, of like, how am I with this person, and what is everybody going to think? And
might as well
we're having sex now, we have a child,
Right?
Might as well get married then.
Yeah. So if we would just get behind the idea that we can have episodic monogamy, right? And still right now, I think in Western culture, there's a preference for monogamy across the board. That's changing too, but I think there's a preference for that. So yeah, you're with somebody for a season, you're with somebody for an episode of life that's really important to both of you. And then how can you just respectfully untie that and move on to the next episode? If we could get behind that and admit that we're already doing that. Yeah. I have a lot of friends, they're on their third marriage. I'm looking at them and going, you're not on your third marriage. It's like being in your fourth career. Like you're just moving on to the next thing.
This is the thing too, with divorce and it being vilified, as opposed to someone's been married and divorced 3 times, but they've had 12 other decent relationships through their lives that are not being vilified for having split up with them. It is the fact that you've broken a contract.
Yes. Yeah.
And now we're going to damn you forever.
Sure.
And often it's about monogamy. Are we monogamous? Are any of us? Is the human being monogamous? Who's taken that?
I cannot answer that question, but I'm going to recommend a book to everyone called Sex at Dawn. So go get it. It's on Audible.
Sex at Dawn?
Sex at Dawn.
Okay.
You will learn more about human sexuality and its actual function than you ever wanted to know. What I took away from that is that the way the human body is designed, the way our sexuality works, and the way we couple is unlike any other organism on the planet. For a lot of organisms, when they copulate, there is parental certainty, right? There is going to be a conception of another being. That is not the case with humans. We actually have it flipped. It's actually quite hard to get a human pregnant. So one of the conclusions that the book points toward, and rightfully does not claim, is that human sexuality may have little to do with procreation and the old narrative that we subscribe to about how we couple. And it may have everything to do with human connection.
Look how we were back in the Roman bath days and all of that, the Game of Thrones, just as an example. Yeah. If that is an example of what we were at some point.
You can take it back and even go quite tribal with the whole thing. And there's lots of beautiful examples in that book, and I'm, again, recommending it to everyone. But the thing it comes down to is maybe human sexuality is about creating human bond.
Yes.
Right?
That's
and
why they
through
call it
sexuality is
glue.
how we express ourselves.
Yes.
How we garner intimacy, which you said earlier. Anybody who's out looking for sexual connections really isn't looking to get laid. They are hoping to God on a dice roll they're going to find the intimacy they want, that they long for.
The intimacy is here. The rest of it plays itself out.
Yeah. The most profound sexual organ is your brain. Has nothing to do with your genitals.
How many people? No, it doesn't. And it's not just the genitals either. You could rub somebody's elbow and they feel,
feel that electricity,
Absolutely. And you can just sit there and look at people, at each other, and you almost have to look away because that is so powerful.
You got it.
I'm so glad we're all on the same page here.
So I think it's really important to also go back to what we talked about, is that the way we relate to the men and the way we help them through these processes and create this brotherhood is ultimately it's up to the individual to make these choices and how they see themselves. I think we're really great in terms of bringing clarity in terms of their function and their masculinity and understanding their role and responsibilities that they have to themselves. But ultimately, it's about the individual making that decision, in terms of how they see themselves moving forward and how they choose to stand in that mission and that purpose in their life. So if it's continuing with the relationship or breaking off, it's really up to them, but they have to take full ownership of that and understand it from a very healthy perspective is really, really, really a good piece. I know that there's some people who've continued with their relationships who've now understand their role in that dynamics and have led to good success, things like that. So I think that's really good to understand too as well in this whole process. But for me, coming from a Native American background, and getting back to the very basics of how we exist as spiritual beings and how we then transcend that into the human existence is very fundamental. It's very universal. and it's in line with a lot of the theologies of how we see ourselves as human being. And working with these two gentlemen, I've only been here for about 4 or 5 months, and I've just been really clear in how this relates to my Navajo traditions and a lot of Native American traditions, and also how these Native traditions have become very dysfunctional even within our own society, of how they're understood and how they're not practiced, how they should be. We have a lot of Native American brothers out there and also Native American sisters out there who are dysfunctional in terms of their behavior and trying to understand what their relationships are. And this is a great for me to see that in this modern day and time that there's actually practical approaches and meaningful approaches and clear approaches in terms of how a person can function healthy.
Is there a viable point when things started to crumble in that family structure where the balance is no longer there?
I think it has a lot to do with, there could be many answers around this, but basically in Native traditions and philosophies and Native American history line, it has a lot to do with a lot of the colonializations in terms of when the Americas were set up, the American dream, right? Mm-hmm. The manifest destiny. Yeah, all of that was led to the dysfunction or breaking up of families, traditions, and cohabitating, and also having a great relationship with the universe in terms of, being in communities and living out in nature. All of those pieces have been dysfunction in that sense and pulled apart. So that's a huge piece to the question that you're asking. But ultimately, it comes back to us as being Native people or being Americans in general. Where's my responsibility in all of this? I can't blame my ancestors anymore. I can't blame colonialization anymore. I can't blame, my family, my dad being a drunk. I can't blame all of these things anymore. I have to take ownership. I have to be in this space where I have to have this great relationship with myself. If we're going to have a successful future, if my children are going to live a healthier life, then I have to be that solution.
You can recognize and maybe even honor the reasons and then set them aside. Draw strength from the fact that you are setting them aside.
Yes,
True.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that kind of touches on one of the things that we talk a lot about, because we get the question a lot, like, really, what's the difference between, adulthood and boyhood or manhood, childhood? Like, what's the difference between an adult, and the healthy expressions of masculinity and kind of the boyhood psychology, like I talked about. And to me, the real mark is responsibility. When you fully accept your responsibility as an adult, as your place, your life here on this earth, and what you're here to do, that's where things really start to turn. That's kind of where the flip happens, where you're no longer, when you're in that childhood mindset, you're still looking for your needs to be met by somebody else. You're still expecting to get something back from something that you do or something that you put out into the world. Whereas in adulthood, you fully accept the responsibility that you're here to contribute just as much as you receive, if not more. Mm-hmm. Because what you're putting out there is now an investment into the world. You're investing into these other people. You're investing into the betterment of everyone else besides just your own, because you're already meeting your own needs. You've accepted that responsibility. It's not up to somebody else to do these things for you. You meet your own needs, you take care of yourself, and then you give back from that place of abundance. And that's what turns things around.
Which clearly doesn't happen at the legal age of manhood. Which
right.
Is
yeah.
18,
and that doesn't happen at
right?
18, doesn't happen at 21, doesn't happen even at 25 sometimes.
Or
that's
40.
what we're seeing. Like, yeah, sometimes not until 40, 45, 50.
We're here 60.
Yeah.
How old are you, Ron?
I just turned 50 this past year,
Okay.
and I went through a whole new evolution of my awareness. And to Greg's point, you're always growing. You're always seeing a larger piece of who you are. And, I turned 50 this past year. Had a beautiful experience with my brother here, Wesly, up on the mountain. We went up and did a coming-of-age ceremony in that sense, and did some prayer and meditation, and being outside in that element under the stars, and having that brotherhood relationship, having him be there for me and support me as I go through this process was really, really endearing, I could sit there and I was crying. I looked over at him. I said, "I love you, brother. I'm really happy you're here. I never thought turning 50 would be so beautiful." So that's brotherhood. That's what we bring to this group is having that support and relying on each other that way. And
choosing those people.
Yeah. Choosing those people and choosing those moments. I had to choose that moment to express myself to him the way I see him. And then also choosing him to be in that space too as well. It was beautiful. It was great. We had an awesome time.
We did. We did. He returned the favor last week.
Did you have a birthday?
Yeah, October 10th.
How old?
47.
Oh, I'd say 32, but
Gosh.
I'm not wearing my glasses at the moment.
Craig, I'm younger than you today because it's Craig's birthday
It's
today.
Greg's birthday today.
Yeah, it's actually
Oh,
my birthday today.
gosh, happy birthday.
Thank you. 35 today.
Okay, so the facial hair throws me every single time. I probably look 12 without it. Right?
Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. If I was clean shaven,
Baby
I'd knock off like
A
at least
cherub.
15 years.
Well, gosh, that's a celebration. This whole hour was a celebration. I'm going to give you guys a moment to say your last notes and also to let people know how to find you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, come find us. We're Psylogia. We have the website, psylogia.org. You can find us on Facebook if you just search Psylogia Institute.
Spell that
Psylogia is
for them.
Psylogia. And then we have the Men of Metal group that we meet weekly here at Max6. That's on Wednesday nights at 7:30. You can also find us there on Facebook. It's Men of Metal, Mettle.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Wesley?
Beautiful. Thanks, brother.
Oh, they're having a moment. Wait a minute.
That's right. That's right. Well, we are having a moment because
We're admiring each other.
You do absolutely
So
look each
I
other
wondered
in the
what my
eye.
plug was going to be, and now I know. And there's a reason why we look each other in the eyes too. But actually, so what I get to say is that starting next week, Psylogia will not only be in Phoenix, Arizona, but we will be in Honolulu,
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
yes.
because I am moving to Honolulu next week. So, so my brothers here are going to keep the fort,
So we're holding it down
In
here
Arizona.
in Arizona.
and I have a one-way
Wesley's
ticket
been turned out.
to Honolulu on October 31st. So,
Is this a whole new chapter?
yeah,
that
this is a whole
you
new chapter in my life.
Intentionally or
Yeah,
sort of
intentionally,
felt?
yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
Congratulations.
46 years in this Arizona summer was enough. I've done my time,
Yes.
and it will always be home.
Hey, that's a
And-
life sentence right there, right?
It was a life sentence. I put in one life sentence.
Now time for a new life.
Yes. And so
At
I'm
least-
moving to the very lush, very feminine, very flow.
Oh, very flow. Oh, I'm so envious. That is so beautiful.
I'll be taking things to Honolulu. So lots of retreats will be happening there. Lots of other things we have planned
Leave me your address.
for the
please.
islands. Yeah. Right. So, and what do we want to say to everybody else? Cultivate your inner voice and listen to it. And,
Please expound on the intuition we all shove down.
yeah, expand on the intuition we all shut down. We all intuitively know whether something is yes, no, or maybe.
Mm-hmm.
We just do. And we don't have the guts
To actually own it.
Yes.
to ever own it. But you know, in every moment, you know right
Yes.
away.
So when they hear it and they think I'm just being paranoid or I'm being over analytical, what do they then get to say to themselves?
Say yes to no.
Mm-hmm.
Say yes to no?
Say yes to saying no.
Say yes to saying no.
Yes.
And as my dear brother always says, self-care is not selfish.
Yes. Brilliant. All these nuggets. All these nuggets.
Gonna get a trademark on that saying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's easy to do. Just put the TM. You don't even have to register it. The law says
Yeah,
you
so
don't.
there we go.
Just put the TM
That's
on it.
my yeah.
Now listen to your own truth and be really crafty at learning how to say yes. Life is trying to bring you what you ask for,
Yeah.
but you have to let it.
If I may just interject here that so many people who are religious and speak to God a lot, specifically God, and then wonder why their prayers are not answered. Why is God not listening to me and not giving to me? It's like the unfortunate joke that the couple whose religion bans them from getting medical care for their child, child dies. Why did God let my child die? God says, I sent you a doctor.
Yeah.
So that's pretty simple, but so powerful. Watch, look, it's not going to be the image you think it's going to be.
Yes.
Be aware of everything around you to
Yes.
be possible.
You will get your gift. It will not be in the wrapping paper you expected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And isn't there a country song about thank God for unanswered prayers or
Yes,
something?
Garth Brooks.
Garth
So
Brooks.
yeah, everybody go listen to that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Go find that on YouTube.
Did I interrupt you? Are you good, Wesley? You
I'm
good?
very good.
Okay. Ron.
Man, leave me on the end to follow up from my brothers. Yeah. My brother here, Wesley, always calls me the elder being 50. That's something I'm still trying to fall into and understand. But my brothers to my left are such beautiful people. And I feel very humbled to be a part of this group. of men who are really trying to change the world in such a beautiful way. For me, what comes to my mind is this understanding in our Navajo traditions, in our Navajo philosophy. Our grandparents and our ancestors always tell us when we say, what's going on? Why do I have to do this? Why is the world happening this way to us? They always go back to the saying of ahwichit-on, ahwichit-on. And you translate that into English, it basically means it's really up to you. But from a larger sense, from an in-depth and a deeper meaning, they're saying it's really up to you and the universe. So how we define the universe, God, Gaia, however we understand that piece, religion, or how those approaches happen, it's really up to you and your relationship to the universe, your relationship to God. And sometimes we get so confined to the hierarchy or to the protocols of how God comes to us, and we forget that it's ever present. The universe is ever supporting us. It's always there. You know, we look at our iPhones, talk about being supported, you know, the technology that is in that particular device. But it's our choosing how we use that phone. How do we use it to better our mission? How do we use it to better our integrity? You know, we always walk around in a social context that we're always deprived, that we don't have friends. But we're always walking across and finding people, and people are always present in our life. And so we just have to have that mindset. In order to have that mindset, we have to have a really strong awareness of who we are internally. And with the Men of Metal, I think that's what we provide for them, is to really open up that understanding of who they are, open up their awareness and see that there's life out there, that the universe, that God is really supporting them. And part of that is recognizing that they're going through a challenge. They're going through a process. They're going through a healing. And if it's a divorce, if it's ending a relationship, if it's losing a job, if it's standing there and just not really appreciating life, that's the healing experience. Mm-hmm. God gave that to you, but you have to have the awareness and the love to understand that that's the beginning point. And I choose to stand in that. I choose to take that on. You know, give me that crap. I choose to be in that place. I want to be in that place. And that's what we do with the men. We give them that opportunity to claim that opportunity to heal. And so I really like that. I really love that. And any opportunity that the Creator gives me, if it's through ceremony or serving as some sort of a coach or serving as a place to help others, that's where I choose to be. And these three guys, the three amigos, we're in that space, and we love doing our job. Yes. We have it with such a passion. I mean, we see these men every day. We look forward to seeing them coming to our meetings. We have our night hike. We have a night hike coming up here in the next full moon. We all go up. We just bond out there in the trails. We're under the stars, being in that space. I know it sounds very poetic, but there's something about just being there with the universe and then walking on that trail being out with other guys and just having that camaraderie.
We don't go into nature. We separate ourselves from it. So when we're in it, it's so absolutely spectacular. Yeah. One quick question. Do you have an age low limitation of boys, men? Where do you draw a line?
Typically not. I'd say, as long as you're legal age to make your own decisions, you're welcome to join us.
Which you can be emancipated from your parents at 14. I understand that. So what is the youngest? Do you have 18-year-olds?
The youngest I think we've had in the group so far is 20.
Okay.
About 19, 20 years old. So he's college student age. But we're pretty much open to anyone that's interested in and wants to be involved.
Good.
Our arms are open, our doors are open.
Good, because the age is, as long as the person is a man, is a young man or an older man.
Yeah. And even then, we've even talked about doing some community outreach programs too, and actually going and get involved with young men and mentoring them.
Youth groups and things.
Yeah.
Because they need it before anything happens.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So that's still an active part that we want to, get rolling out there too. So, because that's a big growing aspect for ourselves to be actually step into a place of mentorship rather than just being a mentee.
Yes. Absolutely. It is a switch.
Yeah.
Okay. I need to take a deep breath because I am so full of the pinging energy that's going on in this room right now. You have been listening to The Naked Truth, hosted by me, Lori Corrigan, and sponsored by Snake Charmer Men's Body Waxing. This show was so totally all about nakedness today, spiritual, emotional, mental, where I paid tribute to the valuable contributions you gentlemen make both personally and professionally. It is a safe zone for you guys to speak your minds amidst this current social climate where you struggle to be heard. Thank you, gentlemen, and until next time.